Thank you all for coming. I'm really delighted to welcome you to this morning's session and to welcome you to Whitehorse and to the traditional territory of the Ta'an-Quatchin Council and the Kwanlin-Dun First Nation, who have stewarded these lands for generations since time immemorial. And we're so grateful to be working and learning and living on these lands. This morning we have a really exciting program. We have two panels. The first is the jurors panel, and the second is an artists panel. We should all silence our phones. I'm sorry, that's my phone, and I'm not. Since I'm not near it, I can't turn it off, but it's kind of a good reminder that it's better not to have these loud interruptions when people are trying to speak. We're going to start this morning's session with some very brief opening remarks by Dr. Leslie Brown, the president of Yukon University. Now, Leslie just went to grab something. Are you here, Leslie? Okay, you're up. So Leslie's background before she became a university president, among any other things, is in physical education. And I've seen amazing videos of her on Instagram skateboarding through the campus grounds. So it's nothing for you to run to the front for your moment. Leslie.
Thank you so much, Julie. Skateboarding through the campus grounds in my presidential regalia prior to convocation. It was a bit risky. Thank you so much, Julie, and what a remarkable turnout. It's my immense pleasure to welcome you to Yukon University. And like Julie, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Kwanlin-Dun First Nation and the Ta'an-Quatchin Council. I would also like to recognize that we come together today from many different backgrounds, identities, and perspectives, and across cultures, genders, and experiences. And I'm grateful for the knowledge that each of you brings. For those of you who have traveled from outside of the territory to be here with us today and this weekend, welcome to the Yukon, and welcome to Canada's North. Understanding the North is essential to also be able to understand its people and its cultures and its values. And here in this northwestern corner of Canada, we are home to 14 First Nations. And each of these nations are rich in their own unique cultural identity. And each contributes to the indomitable spirit that defines the Yukon. And if you haven't already felt it, the Yukon is a unique and magical place, and there's a reason why people visit and don't go home. This land and this place will imprint upon you. This is the land of the midnight sun, the aurora borealis, and a place where majestic mountains kneel to rushing rivers. It's a place of great beauty, of fortitude, and of magnificence. It's a place where vast and untouched landscapes hold stories of generations upon generations of Indigenous people who have lived here since time immemorial. And within this place, with just over 46,000 people, we have a thriving and vibrant arts and culture scene. We boast many professional artists, from painters to carvers, from glassblowers to beaters, from storytellers to musicians, and from fashion designers to filmmakers, each of whom, in some way or another, is contributing to and shaping the cultural narrative of this country. And in doing so, is helping us to better appreciate the many different ways that people see and exist in this world. And on that note, just a few words about Yukon University. Now, universities, like art, are places where we get to push boundaries, whether it's boundaries of comfort or understanding, or boundaries of what we know to be true. Universities embrace opportunities to experiment and to explore the what if, because this is, after all, how we learn. And today, I have the great fortune to welcome you to Canada's newest university, and in fact, Canada's first university north of 60. And here at Yukon University, we have a long history of serving the education needs of this territory. We were established in 1963 as a vocational institute, and in 1983 we became Yukon College. And then in 2020 we were legislated as Yukon University. Last year we celebrated our final step in our evolution as a university when we became the 97th member of Universities Canada. And this recognition confirms that Yukon University has a rightful place among the League of Universities in Canada. And we're very fortunate to have a number of powerful forces driving us towards the realization of this goal. And among those, and a great point of pride for this university, is the School of Visual Arts, or SOVA, located in Dawson City. And if you'll indulge me for just a moment to share just a little bit of history about SOVA. SOVA was established by a group of locals who saw an art school as a catalyst capable of creating a new local economy, one that would counter and eventually stabilize the boom and bust cycle of the mining industry. And if you've been to Dawson City, you will agree that the efforts of those who started SOVA were successful in introducing art as another economy. But the reason for this success is because their vision for SOVA also included the establishment of an artist community to support the school's efforts. And by the time the curricular documents were being drawn up, the Dawson City Art Society had established the Klondike Institute for Arts and Culture, which was functioning as an artist-run center with a contemporary art gallery, an artist residency program, and 2 annual festivals, the Dawson City International Short Film Festival and the Yukon Riverside Arts Festival. 3 partners formed and now govern SOVA, the Trondheim government, the Dawson City Art Society, and Yukon University. And 18 years later, SOVA has continued to build on the community envisioned by the school's founder. For example, all those employed by SOVA are artists. And this year, SOVA welcomed its 18th cohort of foundation year students. Students who will continue the tradition of helping us see the world through the eyes of another. Students who will become bold and confident change leaders. And above all else, people who, by the very nature of their work, will guide us toward empathy, understanding, and inclusion, and equity, and justice, and who will help us build a better tomorrow. I'd like to thank the organizers of this magnificent event, the co-founders, David Trick and Julie J., and thanks also to the Yukon Arts Foundation and the Yukon Arts Center for your work to ensure access to art and culture in the Yukon. And finally, thank you to all SOVA faculty, staff, graduates, and students who may be here today. And a special shout out to Jackie Olson and Aubin O'Grady, 2 of our finalists who are SOVA faculty members. I hope you enjoy this weekend and all that it has to offer. Thank you very much for the opportunity to welcome you to Yukon University, to the Yukon, and all the best for a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown, and welcome all of you. It's so great to see everyone here. I'm wondering how many people here are from, are related to or from or are graduates of SOVA. Just raise your hand, just since we were talking about SOVA and Dawson. There's a few, I can see a couple of people who are from, yeah, okay. Well, welcome. That's great. So I'm happy to introduce our next panel. So on my left is Casey Prescott. He is the CEO of the Yukon Arts Center, and he is pinch hitting for Mary Bradshaw, the Director of Visual Arts. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. Casey, among his many other interesting facts about Casey, he is a trained opera singer. I only found that out recently. We were looking for like a fill-in for one of our performers tonight, Casey. So opportunities abound. So sitting to Casey's left is Sarah Moore Fillmoore, who's the director and CEO of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. Thank you for joining us all the way from Halifax. We really appreciate that. As to her left is Jonathan Shaughnessy, also pinch hitting today, flew in from Ottawa with very little notice. We've recently appointed him to be the juror for the third round of judging of the Yukon Prize. Jean-François Belle-Île was the juror for the first two rounds, where the juror selected the long list and then the finalists, but for urgent personal family reasons was unable to come this weekend. So very fortunately, Jonathan stepped up and is now an integral and experienced part of the jury. So. And to Jonathan's left is Dr. Heather Igloliorte from the University of Victoria. She's also a Canada Excellence Research Chair in Indigenous Art. And Heather was on the jury in 2023, so she provides some continuity from the last round, and she's very familiar with the North. Unlike Jonathan and Sarah, who it's their first trip up here. So we have to give them a very special welcome. And welcome to all of you. I know many of you are visiting the Yukon for the very first time and really appreciate you being here. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it over to our chair, Casey Prescott.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Julie. It's a thrill to be here. I have to remember that I brought up opera once, and it has just proliferated through the community. It follows me now. But we're not here to talk about opera, unless we want to talk about opera. Could be our big segue. Yeah. And thankfully, Julie, you actually, Mary left me a wonderful script, and you just really covered the first page of it, so we can actually get right to the questions. But the panel today, we're going to talk about what I look for in contemporary art. That's our overarching statement. So the conversation will explore what each of you looks for in contemporary art, what captures your attention, how you approach the role of juror, and the broader issues shaping artistic practice today. And after our discussion, we will try to save a little bit of time at the end for some questions from the floor. So I'll try to manage time. We're running a little behind, but we'll try to give lots of oxygen and space to our guests. So, first question. To start, could each of you share a little about how you first came to contemporary art and what drew you into the field of curating? Let's start with Heather.
All right, then. Hi. Ulakut, Dr. Heather Igloliorte Uvunga, Tungatsagitsi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Heather Igloliorte, and I'm a Inuk Newfoundlander and a Nunatsiavut beneficiary from the other side of the continent, Northern Labrador. And as Casey said, I've been at UVic now for a little over 2 years. Very happy to be here because I'm also the returning juror from the previous Yukon Art Prize. And it's great to be back. I love Whitehorse. I know it will not be your last time for either of you coming here. We tried to go to Gather for dinner last night, but they were sold out of tacos by the time that I called them. So you have to come back. if not for any other reason, then for tacos. I guess that's an old question. Like, I went to art school in my 20s. Before that, I had a really great art teacher in elementary school named Angela Baker, who was a white Jamaican woman who taught art. I don't know why I'm having this random memory right now. But we had this great art school teacher in elementary school, or maybe junior high school, where I grew up in Happy Valley Goose Bay. And besides that, everyone in my family was an artist as well. Like, everybody kind of did something creative. My brother was a photographer. My other brother's a painter. My third brother is a chef. And my parents were really artistic. My grandparents were really artistic. It just seemed kind of like a natural progression for me to go to art school. And there's a much longer story there. I thought I was going to be an artist, and then I got in a car accident, and this sort of went sideways into art history. But yeah, I don't know. it's a much longer story than we have space for here this morning. But I guess you could say it's been a lifelong investment.
Hi, good. Is that on? Yeah, they're already on, right? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Jonathan Shaughnessy. As Julie mentioned, I guess I should say I'm Director of Curatorial Initiatives at the National Gallery of Canada. I'm also Interim Senior Curator of Contemporary Art, and I've been working in contemporary art in the field and at the gallery for quite some time. It's a good question. I get a bit like I usually have several answers for how I got into it, but it was quite circuitous. Other than, my mother is British, my father is from south of Ottawa there's a whole story there on Six Nations territory, and land that was ceded to settlers coming up from the United States, Shaughnessy, so Irish. But I guess probably as a child, my mom would always drag me to castles in England. And as a kid, I was like, another one? Like, you're going to go in? But I think maybe there was something that kind of stuck as I then had a very circuitous route into the art world. I worked in kitchens for a number of years, thought that would be my career, but I was always going to museums. And it was probably through music that I got very interested in how music started to kind of, I was always wanted to find music that would kind of get to the edge of, what do you call it, like sort of deconstructing, and that kind of led me to, like, without calling it art, things like Fluxus or John Cage or like these kind of experimental ways of thinking. And then I would read kind of art magazines without really knowing what the art world was. This is before so when I went back to school, because I had a few fits and starts, I studied art history, and that's when I really realized that there was this kind of, and that was in Montreal at Concordia, and realized that there was this really fascinating world that I think I was always sort of wanting to open up to. And a bit like our introductions this morning, I mean, I just think that if you're curious and you want to kind of think through the world in ways that aren't truly kind of already disciplined fully, then I think art is the place to be, and the things you can learn from those that really question all the time. And so that's really what drew me into, and I feel always very honored and very privileged to be doing what I do. And I try to always maintain, even as I now work at the National Gallery of Canada and, so-called define, I guess, elements of the field, I try to kind of always remember that it's all about, what artists do and make that is the reason that we get to do what we do, and keep that openness and curiosity. And so that's really what led me to this, and I just always hope that I can continue to be within this milieu.
Hi, my turn. I'm Sarah Moore Fillmoore. That's so. Jonathan and I and Heather, we've known each other a long time. It's an honor to sit on a stage with you both and to serve on a jury together. I didn't realize how it's a bit boring. I guess we all kind of come in the same way to this. Many of you maybe have the same experience. My parents are academics. My mother is a medieval historian from Queens, New York, and she always thought it was like the best thing to go to museums. And you go one of two ways, right? You either love it or you never want to go to another one. And I was one who loved it, and I loved it so much I broke my arm. I was so excited I spazzed out in a museum, broke my arm when I was 6. So
accidents bring you here? I don't have an accident
it's
story.
It's literally in my bones.
Yeah.
But it was because she's a historian. That's how stories get told, and the value of looking at objects and being able to unpack histories through objects and tell stories. And it wasn't until I realized you didn't have to look at very old things. You could also see people writing the stories in real time and watch people making, and it didn't have to look the way that it traditionally has looked, and you could engage in people in different ways and find art in new forms, and that was very exciting to me. I didn't know I would get to do this job when I was younger, but I've always been much more excited to talk about art than to make it, because I'm not very good at that part, but I enjoy giving space to others and creating context and helping to understand why people do what they do. And I'm coming from the other side of the country, as you heard, and that's my chosen home. It's not the home that I grew up in. So it's also a privilege to understand new communities and learn from people through art. And artists are a wildly important part of every ecosystem. and often undervalued in so many ways. So I feel sort of on the pulpit champion for folks who deserve to be paid and seen and heard and given space to. And I'll just say art prizes, while sometimes controversial, are one of those mechanisms. So I'm very proud that we've all been given this chance to give money to artists, and it's a big part of what we do. And if I forget later, thank you to Julie and to David and to those of you who give your time and energies to that. That was in case I don't get another chance to speak. I'm just going to say all the things.
Right. Thanks. It almost feels like there's a whole other panel discussion just about the beginnings. Lots of tip of the iceberg, felt like. So thank you for those responses. Now we're going to pull the curtain back a little bit. This is going to be more of a juror question. So when you're in the position of juror, what mindset do you bring with you into that room? Let's start with Jonathan.
Oh, wow. Okay. The mindset that I had months and months to think about for this jury. Just for clarity, I'm thrilled to be here, and I've done. Well, I think in our field we get asked for juries. I'm also, well, I'll tell you, my week was due to unexpected events. I was familiar, of course, with the Yukon Art Prize. In fact, worked with Crystal Silver Fox, and so it's been for the Sobey Art Award, and that kind of factors in because on Thursday night we opened up the Sobey Art Award to the public. We'll be doing the jury for that in November, and and then of course I got on a plane yesterday morning after that. So I've been thinking about prizes a lot, and I'm the jury chair for that. That's very different than being on the jury itself. As chair, I think there's a whole set of responsibilities and sort of getting the conversation, which the way I always approach that is to ensure the jury is able to find their way. It's not for the chair to kind of decide, and that's certainly the case in my experience in this award as well. So I guess in terms of preparing, I mean, I just familiarize for sure in all of the artists. In this case, the shortlisted, but also the longer listed, and really I rely a lot on the discussion. So I know coming in what, looking at it, and I might even sort of rank, because that's what we're asked to do, but I never kind of come in with a definitive mind, because I know that juries are very kind of interesting forums, and all the ones that I've experienced, it's very different than an individual. That's why they're juries. So an individual coming in, and I'm always as chair or participating in juries, always really interested in how less can I ever predict that I come in saying, oh, for sure, it's probably that. And then you get in a group of peers, and things happen, and thorough discussions happen. And I think just being open to discussion, and for me, ensuring that every practice, we're in the realm of subjectivity, but and that goes without saying, that it's not like we can ever, for an art prize, I think, come up with an objective set of criteria to say, oh, they check all these boxes, therefore they get it. It really is about a conversation with people who, and I'll say that too because I think it comes in to the question of, you know, I think for Heather, for Sarah, for many of us, and I'm sure some in the room, I mean, we spend all our days thinking about art and what artists make and do. And so there's that kind of basis of thinking through what I've seen in other places, what I'm doing, and bringing it to here, and what I'm learning from the artists that I'm asked to kind of like speak about, and kind of have that feedback for myself, and then share it with others. So yeah, is that?
Yeah.
Leave it at that for
That's
now.
Great.
I guess. Yeah.
That's great. You know, you had to jump in and kind of save the day for our other jury member, and it's really appreciated because you have so much experience in this kind of work that you can that you could step in and help us. Has everybody here seen the show? Raise your hand if you've seen it yet. It is fantastic. I'm so excited for you to see it tonight. Can we get a round of applause for all the artists? They are phenomenal. I walked in yesterday and just went, wow, it's like a world-class installation, and Mary did a really phenomenal job. We're so incredibly impressed by the team they have there. I know that not only were the installers from the gallery installing that piece, but that they also, it sounds like, installed all the other shows or helped all the other shows in town for the art crawl last night. So really phenomenal team that you have here at the Yukon Arts Center. I think that I'm the returning juror, and of course I'm from the North as well, and I'm an Indigenous person, so I bring a lot of thinking about community and thinking about relational aesthetics and about community-based practices and what it means to win the Yukon Art Prize, as opposed to the SOBI or a national prize or an international prize or something that's about career stages, because I think it's really interesting that we have we've shortlisted the finalists being 6 women, or 6 women or feminine people. That there is that there are career levels that are mid-career through to senior artists, or people who've been practicing here and living in the Yukon all their lives for 4 decades. And I'm just really delighted with both the long list and the short list. I think we did a great job picking 12 really phenomenal artists. And so we got to see the long list show last night as well and meet the artists in person, and that was really exciting. And to also know that some of the artists that, if you don't know, the jury, Julie and David do a great job of taking the jury out to meet other artists in the community. And so some of the artists who we did studio visits with last time applied for the Art Prize this time. And that's really lovely because they were people that we had sort of built a relationship through it. And I just see that that's going to continue to grow here, and that artists should feel like they can put themselves out there for this award. You don't need to have a super long established practice, or you don't need to necessarily have shown your work in the public in the same kind of way. Everyone is coming in with an opportunity to be a part of something that's growing here. So to me, that's really exciting to know that we're just in the 3rd year of this prize and going into the future, what it means for artists who can take this step and then also go on to perhaps other things, or to be celebrated by community, or to receive some press or other form of recognition, but for that to be both inside the Yukon and outside, I think that's really great. So when we were looking at the works and settling on the long list and then onto the short list, it was really tough decisions because there's a lot of really great work here, and incredibly diverse. People are working in all different kinds of media. You kind of expect it to be lots of landscape work because the landscape is so incredible. And then it's sound art, and it's laser cut, and it's all kinds of different things. So that was really exciting, I think, as a process, what we were looking at.
Yeah, and I don't want to, we have been asked to come here from other places. So that's also something that was important for us to wrestle with. We're bringing different perspectives to the table, and we're doing a lot of research. There's a lot of depth in what we're trying to bring to the table. Research from each of the artists' portfolios, what they want us to see, and what we could discover on our own. So the show is one thing, and then there's all the background that we are looking at that you expect us to consider when we're making those decisions. And Jonathan's right, the jury is its own beast. So, it's a beautiful thing that there's also a public kind of prize, because that gives a different kind of voice. And what we try to do is bring our own experience and our own education and our own perspective to the prize, and try not to overstep in any way, and listen to each other, learn from each other, learn from what we're seeing and what we're hearing, and from the great support we received throughout the process. But it's also a lot of fun. It's like a master class. You're introduced to things you didn't really expect to be seeing or hearing or talking about, and it's very enriching and invigorating and daunting. So it's been a lot of fun. It's a job that you can't take lightly. You're like, yeah, it sounds great, I'd love to go to Yukon. And then you're like, oh, you're actually making a big decision for people in a big way, and that's big work. So it's a big job.
Well, I just wanted to pick up because I actually think too, and I also wanted to say, it's congratulations, to all of the. I mean, it's exciting to be able to get to see applications. I was just thinking when you were talking that, as a curator, it's not like you can go to a one-stop shop and say all the artists are there and I want to work with this artist. The only way we sort of see things, and that's why I think these sorts of forums are so important, and to get invited is great, is that I would have thought when I was in school and stuff, you just read magazines and you figure out who's where and you kind of make a show or something, but it's not that. It's all about building relationships. It's about finding people where they're at, and so I think you can do that through seeing a lot of exhibitions. You can do that when I go to cities, doing a ton of studio visits, of course. But then I don't know how many applicants were there for the...
More than 70.
More than 70. So, having engaged with from the short list to the longer list to the applicants, and then for the SOBI, it's upwards of 280 artists from around Canada. Where do you get that kind of reach to be able to say? And they may not make it all the way, but that's a repository. And it may be because right now they're not, but in 10 years' time, maybe that artist comes back and you've had a record of that. So I just wanted to kind of add that it's actually a very useful thing, and also, and coming from me from Ottawa, you from Halifax, and now Victoria, but to be able to come here, because I don't think I would have discovered those 70 artists necessarily. And sorry about that term. I hate using that term. Come into contact and get to know those artists. I don't discover. People don't get discovered.
I was definitely
Find them
like,
where they are.
We're here for the prize, but I'm also like writing down the names of the beadwork artists at the KDCC. And I'm like, maybe this person would be great for a workshop in the future. There's lots of different ways that we are learning from and becoming more connected to the Yukon.
It's a big job to put together an application, but we look at all of them. So it's not for nothing. And they all matter. So even if the work, as you're saying, isn't chosen, it's definitely serves. It serves the time you've put into it. It serves to do that work.
And I think that's something, I know when I've spoken with Julie about one of the silver linings of this competition is bringing people out and sort of creating those networks, because we are isolated and we're more remote, but so just having your work seen and just where that percolates and what that can lead to is a really, really valuable thing. Now I have a quick follow-up question, and Heather briefly touched on this, but the question is, so when you are encountering an artist's work for the first time, what qualities, ideas, or approaches are you most attracted to? Pulling the curtain back even farther. Sarah?
Well, everyone is in a different context, right? If you're on the jury, there are certain criteria that we started to establish in those first conversations, and some immediately, we're used to looking at art. So you kind of bring, okay, does this look like something that feels like I recognize? And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's not great in your own, bringing your own baggage to it. But in every day, what I'm looking for from art is something that gives me something. It tells me a story. It makes me have an emotion. It demonstrates great skill. It speaks to a place or a time. And if it does all of those things really well, then, sometimes it makes me cry. That's not so hard for me because it's all like right there. But it's amazing. Great work is a very beautiful thing. And I'm looking for something that does that job well. And it doesn't have to look like a specific, there's no preconceived thing I'm looking for, but like anything, you go to a restaurant, you know what something should taste like. You're excited to choose and try something new, and when it's good, you know it's good. And the same thing with art. And it's not as simple as if you like it, it's good. That's sort of simplifying it, but all of that training, all of those different conversations you've been having, all of the things that you know are happening in different circles and different conversations. I like to say I work on the edge of the earth, out there in Nova Scotia. It's a bit trite saying that when I'm sitting here. So it's about all of the different edges and figuring out where those edges, where the commonalities are, what's unique, what speaks loudly in certain ways, and what's different, and how do I respond to that. So that's how I approach the different new artists, new work that I'm looking at, and getting deeper into those kind of conversations.
Everything you said. You know, I when I was a NASCAD, Nova Scotia College of Art and Design student 20 years ago, I had Jerry Ferguson as a professor, and his thing was always like, make it work, make it do something. And a lot of students would be like, what do you mean by do something? He was like, you'll know when it's doing it, you know. And as someone who has now, you know, spent the last 20-ish years in the arts and currently teach in a visual arts department and work with a lot of students, I get so happy when the artist has the breakthrough. And I feel like we talked about it. You're like, oh, they got there. They figured out the thing that's been stressing them out and keeping them up at night, waking them up at 2:00 in the morning. And I think that I've gotten pretty good at seeing when the artist has gotten to where they want to be, and that's exciting for me. Is like when you see that, like, okay, this is a process, and they're working towards it, and then they realize what they're trying to do. And I find that really satisfying. And so that's like one of the things, and like you said, it doesn't have to be based in any particular media or any kind of thing. When you see an artist who's like, I'm doing my thing and I got there, I had a breakthrough, that to me is like, you really feel so happy for them, you know, like, and you can see it in the work, I think.
Gosh, I'm trying to remember. It's a big question, I think, and I agree with everything that's kind of been said. I mean, I had a few sort of anecdotes that I was thinking about. One is, I mean, contemporary art. You know, it's such a broad field. You know, at the National Gallery, the way the galleries are structured, if you've had the opportunity to be there, you know, you go through this linear. Well, we're trying to break the narrative, but, you know, historical Canadian art into modern painting and everything's abstract. Okay, I get it. And then you kind of carry this threshold into the white cube of the contemporary gallery. And it's like, where am I now? Oh, that can be art. Oh, there. Okay. And it's like totally broad and everything is up for discussion. So in some ways I find that working in contemporary, you're kind of a generalist. I don't see, you know, in terms of being open. So that's one I find funny. The other thing is doing studio visits. I often have this thing, I don't know how I feel, but if I'm in a city and I'm meeting, you know, let's say there's 15 artists over the course of a few days, the references and the stories you hear, and I would think if I could somehow record all of that and it was somehow I could pull it up anytime I wanted, like, God, you'd just be like this repository of like every idea in the world because they're all there, and it's super exciting. But for me, I think that when it comes to your question, Casey, is I see artists as, and certainly within the field of contemporary art, as world builders in one case, or world responders, or sometimes a little bit of both. So I think artists can critique things they see in the world through what they do, but I also think that they shape worlds because there's no, you know, that. An artist practice, you know, there's traditions, there's things that can kind of ground a practice, but in many ways, I think that the kinds of artists that really excite me are those that maybe are extrapolating that into some place that we've never been. And then that has to be kind of, that's a real risk, because to then say, I think people might want to be in this world with me, then that's where the kind of element of like, well, who's that going to be? And some artists can toil away in relative obscurity for a long time until their world joins with a bigger world. And so I kind of like to see when I'm, you know, speaking with artists, getting to know them and seeing the work, like, is that a world I want to be in? Does it attract me in some ways, whatever that might be? But it's not just that, because I'm only one person. So then I'm sort of looking in mapping the field and certainly thinking about things like building a collection is, well, okay, I'm just one person. Maybe I don't really relate to that, but it seems like these people are. So there must be something in that kind of artistic practice which is resonating with, you know, a particular element of the public or a particular community, and so that needs to be accounted for. So that's where I kind of take. We had this debate some years ago with a historical curator that in the department, and it was a collectors group, and this question of, do you love it? Because it kept on coming back, like when you'd have to pitch something to like the National Gallery Collection, say, but I love it. And I'm like, well, do you have to love it? Like you as an individual? Because these people might love it, and it's representing something in the collection, but I don't think I necessarily, I can appreciate where it stands. And so I kind of try to mitigate all those things, but when it comes down to me, like I just, I find and also, sorry, for contemporary art, the other thing I like to say is I think there's this idea that we get everything. Yeah, no. You walk into a gallery and it's like, oh, I get it because I'm a contemporary art curator, so I know I walk into most galleries and say, I have no clue what's going on here. Like, I don't know what's happening, and it intimidates me, and my brain
You're in the
is going
top
into a place
position
unknown.
in the country.
And so, you know, but I think that's a humbling position, and I find, you know, you go to an art fair and you're inundated with thousands of pieces, and then it's like, but I find that if something kind of gets me, then I'll spend time with it. And I really like to also think about this act of looking, because we just speed by and we have to capture something. And I find this act of looking is really like coming back to something and spending time with it. I really like, and it was actually, if I can just say, and I'm sorry, but Michel Dubois, a Montreal-based artist, and I remember he was doing an opening at the Canada Council space in Ottawa some years ago, and he gave this analogy I really love because he said he'd just come out of a media conference, and it was a piece that was his opening, like some interactive work, and the journalists were saying, "What does it mean? What does it mean?" And he responded and said, "Well, let me put it this way: when you walk through a beautiful park." And you're looking and you're experiencing something and you're seeing the trees and everything, do you ask what it means? That there should be a response that's kind of like, one thing to that? No, you just kind of enjoy and you experience that and then you take that forward. So I try to also think about that and that engagement when I'm encountering a work, and does it stay with me or not?
Thank you. Wow. Julie, you can just let me know. We're kind of heading towards 11, so there's, I think, a couple more questions I'd like to ask. One more question.
And then we have a question for Julie.
And we have a question for you, Julie. Okay, well, this is, I think this is a great way to leave it, and thank you all for being so generous this morning. But if you could leave Yukon artists with one thought or advice as they continue their work or apply next year, what would it be? I know, sorry. I know. I didn't think I'd get to this one, but now we're sort of like last one. I think it's a nice one.
It's a great one.
Yeah.
I think Jonathan probably has this answer.
I think Jonathan too.
I just went on about like parks and,
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Advice.
You go ahead. Yeah,
Advice. That presumes that we have something to leave. Well, keep making. Like, just keep making. Don't get caught up in too much of it should be something. Ask people to come and see it and talk about it. Don't compare yourself to everybody else. It doesn't have to be that. Be bold and brave. You're already that. You're exactly where you need to be, and keep questioning it and keep pushing it. Don't be afraid to bring it to anybody that you want. So by that I mean we are accessible people. I mean, don't believe the blogs, especially about Jonathan. But we are public servants. We are here. Our professions, ask curators, ask gallerists, ask people whose opinions you're curious about, and keep asking. And don't hear no. No is everywhere. You don't have to hear that. You just have to know if you are making work that feels to you like there's a problem you're trying to resolve, keep trying to resolve it. And put your name in every place that you want to be, and you will get somewhere. Who knows what that is? It's probably better than where you thought you wanted to be. It's very presumptuous to think that I could say something that is more than what you're already doing. That's all I'll say.
Okay, can I? Oh, I just have one thing, but you go and then I'll.
Okay. All right. Okay. It's a tough question because my first thought is like, don't make art to win prizes. It's not a chili cook-off. Like, you don't need to. You shouldn't be thinking about like how will this art win a prize. I think it's like you should be working on your own practice, and then it will come through, and then. The recognition is nice that there's like this one big prize and another prize later on, but everyone who is on the long and short list is incredible. We had a really tough decision. So, and that said, I would say that for artists, very practically, the documentation of your work is really important. Like good quality, well lit, clear photographs that demonstrate the scale and any details that are important in the work. Like that is really critical to helping the jury. Like the jury is online only for the first 2 rounds, and then every time you see art in person, you're like, oh, I knew it said it was a meter, but I didn't realize it would be a meter. So there's always that bit of like you see it online and then you see it in person, but good documentation, really clear, well lit, well photographed,
updated website.
Yeah, updated
and within
website.
your network capabilities,
yeah.
That's something that came up a few times.
Yeah, exactly. Because we really updated website, especially because we really did look at the whole practice for every artist. Like we really deeply considered not just the works in the show, because of course we only shot the show yesterday. Yeah. So like we were looking at people's long histories and their trajectories and where they've taken their work, and like that's all
it's how
really
we do
interesting
research.
part of it.
It is how
and
we
how
do
you
research.
do the research, exactly. So update your website because that's critical to, if you haven't updated it but you've been working hard for the last 5 years, we don't know that. So I think that's really important as well.
If that's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has been covered. The only thing I was thinking of, and it kind of gets to what you're saying about don't make art for prizes, was just in my experience, like, yeah, it's about that goal, and I know it's tricky because you're making work, and of course the only place I use those analogies of the art world but lives is exhibitions, like outside of the studio where it connects with other works and other artists in a kind of conversation, but at the same time it starts in the studio and with what you're thinking about. So there's a couple of things. One is any opportunity for conversation studio visits, I would say. I mean, many are probably doing it, but just in terms of connecting, but also I think just sort of somehow centering on what the practice is and not necessarily where it's going. You kind of said it, but that's something I find, and it's just from my experience of, I'm aware when just when you're having a conversation of like, well, what could that get me, or where can that go? And I think that's a tricky one to probably pull back and say, well, the work's going to get me there. And so I would continue to apply for the prizes, but I take every opportunity to kind of share and think about your work in dialogue. I think and I think that an application does that because you're putting it into dialogue with a jury. So it kind of relates to what you're saying.
Totally. I like risk takers. I like seeing experimental work, whether it's experimental in landscape painting or sound or whatever. Like just, always pushing yourself, I think, is something that comes through.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll just end with saying, just to bring it back to opera.
Perfect.
Sing us out, Casey.
Well, no, I'd say learn opera to win prizes. There are lots of prizes in opera. If you can sing well, you can pretty much live on prizes in opera. So that's just as a side note. But do we want to put Julie on the hot seat?
I don't think that's true of the visual
arts.
Who's
gonna? Oh, and then we're going to do a couple.
Can we just ask Julie one question? Yeah. So we had big conversations yesterday in the gallery. Because, while I've been here before, this is Jonathan and Sarah's first time, and so we were talking about the fact that it's interesting that all the jurors don't come from the Yukon, and we were hoping you could talk a little bit about that and why that is the strategy that you've settled on here for this prize.
Thanks for the question. Is this mic on, Steve? Yes, it's on. Okay, great. So that's a really great question, and there's 2 or 3 reasons why. So one reason why we want to bring people from outside the Yukon to jury the competition is that the Yukon is a pretty isolated place, and we can be a bit insular, and what we really want to promote through the prize is greater dialogue between Yukon artists and the larger art world outside of the Yukon. So, and we really also want to get more people from outside the Yukon seeing Yukon art. Because so much of it deserves to have a wider audience. So having 3 people every 2 years come in from outside who are curators, who are well regarded in the larger art world, and having them have an opportunity to see the art and dialogue with the artists is really helpful for Yukon artists. So I'd say that's one of the first reasons. I think the second reason why we don't have any local Yukon people on the jury, although we do have a jury moderator, Heather von Steinhagen, who is from the Yukon, but the 3 jurors are always from outside. And that is partly because being such a small and isolated community, we have an incredibly supportive arts community, and everybody wants to support and nurture and encourage each other. And I think that if people were put in the difficult position of making decisions about their peers, it would be very difficult for them to continue. And of course, everybody here knows each other, or a lot of us know each other. So it's also really difficult because we would all come with some sort of prior history and experience of one or other of the artists that would make it difficult for us to be truly objective, even though we could acknowledge, understand, and say what our bias was, but it's still not the same as having 3 people come in from outside the Yukon. So we're just so honored and delighted that every time we put out the call, and we always ask for the people who we think would be the best possible jurors that you step up and you say yes, and you come with enthusiasm. So thank you very much for that. So we have a couple of minutes for questions from the audience, and I have a mic. So put up your hand if you have a question, and I will come over with the mic. Okay, I see one.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. My question relates to the development of an aesthetic. And I'm assuming, because you've all been in the art world, I'm a beginner and I'm struggling with coming to understand what my aesthetic is and might be, and so on and so forth. So it struck me that you will have very developed your aesthetic, and will have a good conceptual understanding of what and why and where and so on and so forth. And I can't help but think that must put you in a difficult situation when you're all thrown together and you have to come up with some judgments about other people's artwork. So I'm wondering how you tailor, or what kind of indents or what kind of expansions happen to your aesthetic sense when you're working in a group that has to make a decision at the end. Thank you.
Good question.
Okay. No, it's interesting because I was going to say aesthetics maybe a couple of times today, and I didn't do it. And it's interesting because it's not the first thing that I think. It's funny, but it's not the first thing I think about, because at least not in a conventional sense, because questions of form and beauty, to me, I would say it's beautiful, and there's, we've seen a lot of beautiful work, a lot of technically savvy work, a lot of work that is pushing aesthetics, but also pushing formal and contextual boundaries. But for me, anyways, it's not something that I lead with. There has to be something which attracts you to the work, which I would say is something that an aesthetic form can do. But I find that, at least within a contemporary context, that we're not just in the realm of painting where we see aesthetic developments and then things kind of get to a place. Like, I find it so broadly defined that it has to be a conversation that's about many, many things, and it's not necessarily going to come back to that. So it's a really good question. I think about that term aesthetics all the time, but I also think that art has expanded so much in terms of what it can be, that when I think of, in fact, I probably am less attracted to things that are conventionally repeating a form, like, let's say, genre landscape painting, and there can be technically very sound paintings that are depicting a beautiful place that is going to attract me, but it may not be the thing that's telling me something different about that place that is also, maybe countering certain traditions or certain ways of doing and making. So I think that it's why we need to, and you can answer, but I think we always in any jury take a minute to kind of establish ourselves and what we're bringing to the table and how we're looking at things. And then I think it's just being open to kind of seeing how other people look and see, and what because we're also all bringing our biases, we're all bringing certain things. And I think you were very open about, I don't have the depth of knowledge that Heather has in terms of a whole breadth of Inuit and Indigenous aesthetics and the grounding in that and that kind of thing. I'm my own background is much more in sort of that period where art kind of breaks apart, and I'm really interested in how kind of conceptual art kind of comes to the fore and ideas start. So we're coming from very different starting points, I think. I think it's a great question, and I appreciate it.
Can I just ask you a quick follow-up? Your answer was very interesting to me, particularly because you assumed I was using aesthetics in the very old sense. So if we're... Sorry, can you do it?
Put your mouth.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry, I don't want to dominate, but your answer was really intriguing, because you seem to assume that I think of aesthetics in the old sense and relate it specifically to painting, whereas I'm struggling to look at contemporary art, particularly conceptual art, some of which I really do like, but I'm struggling to, shall we, instead of using the word aesthetics, let's use underlying principles or underlying issues.
For sure.
And I'd like, it would be nice to have an explication of what could replace the notion of aesthetics in contemporary art? And of course, I don't expect you to do that.
I know. Well, we're on the same page. Like, in
there are
terms
3
of
minutes
you're
left to
saying
this
what I'm
panel.
saying. We're on exactly the same page, and that's why I say it's not a term that actually gets used very often. I find, at least unless it's very refined to a particular subfield of and so I think we're saying the same thing. Underlying principles, again, is, I think, something that's also fascinating. For me, I kind of look at a work and its own universe. Like, that's the thing. Like, does this work support itself through what the artist is telling me that it's supposed to be doing, what I'm getting from it? And is there something in this which is kind of creating an orbit where it can then move into different, areas of circulation, I would say, as an artwork with some underlying principles that are kind of, catching in other areas. Like I don't want to keep going, but it's sort of like.
But you also asked about, as jury members, how we come together or fit our own principles to others, and that's part of the, I think, layered process of choosing and bringing our own values together. And so, because we're not, Jonathan came in hot in the last minute, but there are conversations that shape why we've come to the 6 artists that we've put forward as the ones that we want to ultimately talk about. And in those conversations, we've already defined what values we're going to be looking to underline or wrestle with or highlight.
And those 6 artists, or even the 12 artists, they don't share an aesthetic at all. Like, not in media or practice or meaning. I think that what they have is their own individual aesthetics that I think comes through. That there's something that they are trying to foreground, and that we are receiving the message there. If that makes sense.
But we were curious about ways of making, about how these artists were looking at the world, and senses of humor, senses of gravity. Those were questions, urgency about the world, the world around them, curiosity. There were some very big things that were being foregrounded for us. We're each interested in different things, and together we pick something that reflects a day's conversation. That's...
Yeah, and you are, I think, seeing in each of the artists that are in the exhibition that everybody can see. You talked about underlying principles and that. I mean, I think if we were to take, and that's a bit about the orbit around an artwork, like I think we do see when you're looking at certain artists that are making sculpture, certain artists that are engaged with certain histories, and then there's installation-based practices in there, there's video art. I mean, these things do have histories, and I think that, for me at least, I don't have to know or identify those histories, but I'm expected, like, there are the ways that really getting to the nature of your question, how aesthetics is kind of expanded or how the underlying principles are expanded. We can still roughly say that I'm looking at this installation and there's a history to that form, but how is this artist kind of conveying it and doing things with it? And from there, start asking questions, I think.
Okay, there's another question, a couple I saw.
It's a good one. It's good.
Good morning. This is a very quiet microphone. Thank you so much, AV guy. So I am originally from Ontario, but I'm now living in Dawson City, and I run the Odd Gallery along with my peers, which is off to my left-hand side, at the Klondike Institute for Art and Culture. So this is a peer-to-peer question, because I've done blind juries before where I just see the artwork, but we just finished our selections for the exhibition schedule, and then we have like their full CV. And so when you're looking at their CV, like, what do you look for? And I know it's like a prize versus an exhibition, which is a different selection process, but like, what are the things you really look for? Because there are some phenomenal emerging and mid-career artists, but then there's senior artists with like so much more experience, and it's like difficult to, because it's not apples to apples.
Yeah, it's a life's work right there. Yeah, and the CV can
Never
get in the way,
apples to
man.
apples.
Yeah, exactly. There is no apple in the group. Yeah. Yeah, CV can really, that can be a massive curveball. And in juries, the CV can also dominate the conversation, especially for people who are operating outside major centers. It can be such a hard one. People lean in juries on CV. And I have to say, we did not even look at, that was not part of our, I'm just pat ourselves on the back. But it can really be and that how horrible you work your whole life to try to have a rich CV, and that can be something that stands in your way. It shouldn't be that way. But it can do all of the work, or it can get in the way of the work. So you have to decide as a group what you're going to, where are you going to put your value? Where are you going to put, how are you going to balance that? What is it looking like in terms of the structure of the conversation or the structure of the show? And there's good stuff that can happen there.
I mean, I don't know if I know. I was gonna.
Yeah.
She looked at me. You know.
I mean, I think, okay, so let's use the Sobey Award as an example, because myself and I think a lot of other people really advocated for the addition of the recent circumpolar category. And by the way, everybody, please nominate artists from here for the circumpolar category. We advocated for that because we understand that there are less galleries in the North, and that, you know, at the Yukon Art Center, they're trying to rotate through a number of artists and not just show the same people all the time. And then it's like you've got the Yukon Art Center and Arts Underground and a couple other little venues. And if you're from one of the even further out communities, or if you're in a fly-in only community, it's incredibly hard for you to like build up your CV the same way that it is super easy in Toronto, where there's an artist run center on every block. And so, you know what I mean? And so we wanted to add that extra category in recognition of the fact that people's CVs are going to look differently if they live in a small place or a remote place. If they, it's going to change the way that your art is made. You can't make massive, giant things if you're at a fly-in community, because you can't get it out because it costs $1 million. And so, like, thinking about that and saying these people should be judged as peers across the North, and not in competition with people living in Montreal, because it's a very unfair playing field. So I think that that's a part of the question, is like, yes, of course you want to consider, like, are they showing? Are they actively trying to, like, get out there? Are they putting their work forward for community exhibitions, or are they, like, doing public sculpture? Like, that is important to see that someone is, like, has an active practice and they're really working at it. But it's not really fair to compare CVs from somebody who's, like, living in London or Paris versus someone who's living in, you know, some other smaller place. And so that's a consideration that I would say around that way. And to think about, like, if someone's really working hard, to want to give them that kind of recognition. You know, if there's an elder in the community who maybe only is known in the community. I just mentored some emerging curators to do a show of all their grandmothers. You know, like, that kind of a thing I think is also really important, because there are people that you know from your community who are like, that person's an amazing artist, and they also help everyone else, and they've been training people all their lives, but they don't get the recognition necessarily. And so that's another thing that's really important, I think, is to provide a platform to boost emerging artists to get out into the art world, but also to recognize those people who have maybe spent their entire careers not really selling their work, but making it for community.
I think we have time for one more question. Let's see. Okay, I see a hand up over there. Coming with the mic.
Just to be on the mic. It's too loud. I'm from Winnipeg. I've only been in the Yukon for 1 year. I am a beadwork artist. I'm from Treaty 5, which is Cree Métis territory for me. And I'm also a SOVA graduate. Sorry, it's all catching up to me. Oh, God. Thank you for touching on that, Heather, because that's kind of my question, is what advice would you have for people? I think of the way that I learned to bead, which is with my community and with more of just like a setting that relies on, community and relationality. And I think within that area of beadwork artists and other Indigenous artists, I don't want to paint everything with the same brush. There is kind of a space between where there are a lot of artists who are doing amazing work who aren't formally trained and who are maybe in urban centers, who are not necessarily falling into the same categories of having the opportunities to exhibit and having the, I guess, chances to show or be involved, I guess, in the community as like a greater whole. And like, what advice would you have for people? I'm just thinking of my own community who do so much work in terms of the relationality aspect and who have this amazing like CV, maybe you can call it, of just like working with each other and responding to things in that way. And like, what advice, or how do you approach understanding stories and work that is not necessarily like spelled out for these kinds of like institutional contexts, maybe, is what I'm asking. Is that super confusing? I don't know.
That's a big question. Which part of that? What's that? It's a structural question. Yeah, absolutely. And like, first of all, I would say I know some beadwork artists who are probably making more money than contemporary artists I know. Just like, selling $800 earrings every single day kind of thing. But not everybody wants to be in the contemporary art space in the same way that like what we're talking about now, showing in galleries and so on. But one of the coolest shows I saw this year was Tegan's Big Blingy Ear. What's the name of the show? My Big Bougie Earrings? Yeah. We were here in the summertime, and I was here in the summertime, and saw that show, and I loved it. Like, that was an excellent example of, showing community-based work in a gallery context and doing a really great job of appreciating the materials. The other thing that we really liked in the gallery was how Randy put beads and hide and quills and things in little bowls so that people could touch them, so that they would get an appreciation for the materiality. Like, we thought that was a nice feature of that installation yesterday, is that there was an opportunity, you could smell it, It's like, don't touch the art, like touch this piece over here and like get a sense of what that materiality is like. Do you want to add to the bigger question?
I think it's great to keep asking those questions, because there are scholars like Dr. Igloliorte who are doing work to change the institutions. So it's not just about the artists, it's about a big change that can happen and value different things and make space in different ways. It's up to us to change, not necessarily. It's not, the leverage is not for you to push, it's also for us to change.
I think so. I mean, I think that the question is, that's why I said it's sort of a structural matter, and something, I think about, the National Gallery. I guess I should be speaking about the National Gallery of Canada, and you think of shifts that have happened. It's not perfect by any stretch, but in terms of some of the programming, and we see practices coming in. I mean, Radical Stitch was that was a hugely popular show that my colleague Michelle Lavallee was, of course, a part of, Director of Indigenous Ways and Decolonization at the Gallery. That department also, I should say, is now larger than any individual curatorial department. There's 8 members, all Indigenous, they're working, including 3 Inuk colleagues. And that's not just to put the numbers out, but just to say that it's interesting, because and I think we had a question about aesthetics, we've got a question about, it's like, there's also this trend, which we have to buck up against, about artists that on a CV that, I'm also adjunct faculty at Ottawa U, and I'm seeing practicing artists who have come back to the program to get an MFA, because that's the only way that they're kind of have to get to that level. Michael Belmore, for example, came through the program. I'm like, Michael, what are you doing here? He's an established, he's been working for so long. And he said, well, I'm not going to, this is the way I need to kind of be able to take that next step, because my CV needs to have that. So you sort of have that. So you're hinting on a really big, and I would say too, that there's a question of also the art worlds within the art worlds. So the big institutional, slow-moving conversation of that kind of, still what that canon is, and then the kind of work that gets done in other spaces that I hope, and I think that's folding in a little bit, like looking at what artist-run centers are doing. Like, this conversation is shrinking, I think, for professionals in the field and that kind of thing, to know that that's not outside, it has to be part of the entire conversation. Yeah.
Thanks. I said there'd just be one more question. We're okay? Okay. So I want to thank our panelists very much. This has been really illuminating and educational to have the opportunity to hear from people outside, from curators, and I know there are a lot of artists in the audience, so hopefully this has been helpful for you. We have another panel starting basically immediately, which is of artists, so there will be more opportunities to ask questions. So we're not going to take a break. We're going right into the second panel, after which we will have lunch in this room. So food and drink are coming, but I'd like to just invite our panelists to leave. I think we should thank them very much.